What happens when someone accuses an elderly woman of faking her illness, hoping to take everything she has? Eleanor's quiet strength, and one doctor's note, turned the tables in a way no one expected. What followed left her entire family speechless. Eleanor Drake sat quietly by the window in her small, sunlit living room, a crocheted blanket draped over her knees and a stack of mail on the side table. The late autumn wind rattled the glass, but inside, her house was warm, filled with the faint scent of lavender from a vase on the mantel. It had been nearly 2 months since her health began to decline. Strange spells of dizziness, fatigue, and a stubborn cough that lingered well past summer's end. She tried to keep up her routines, walking to the post office, tending her garden, meeting her friends at the church for Tuesday teas. But lately, every step cost her double the effort, and even simple tasks left her breathless. Her daughter-in-law, Veronica, had noticed. Or, more accurately, had chosen to notice just enough to make herself present. Veronica swept in most afternoons now, dropping by with a tense smile, always carrying a notebook and her phone. "I'm just checking in, Eleanor," she'd chirp, her eyes darting around the room. "Let's make sure you're still managing." Her tone, laced with condescension, was more grating than helpful. At first, Eleanor appreciated the company. She'd been lonely since her son, Richard, took a job overseas. Veronica had become her main link to family, though the warmth between them was always forced. But as the days dragged on, Eleanor began to sense something darker lurking beneath Veronica's concern. The questions became pointed. "Have you been taking your medication? Why haven't you called your doctor? Are you sure you're not making it sound worse than it is?" Eleanor tried to ignore the skepticism in Veronica's voice. She knew her own body. She knew something was wrong. Her doctor, Dr. Patel, had been attentive, sending her for tests and checking in by phone. Still, Veronica pressed on, insisting Eleanor was being dramatic, exaggerating symptoms to get attention or avoid responsibility. She even began telling neighbors that Eleanor was just fine, probably just a touch of the blues. The more Veronica dismissed her complaints, the more isolated Eleanor felt. Tension mounted. One afternoon, after Eleanor nearly fainted trying to reach a saucepan on the top shelf, Veronica launched into a scathing monologue. "You're not sick, Eleanor. You just want everyone to fuss over you. You've always been like this, looking for sympathy, pretending you can't manage." Her words stung, and Eleanor's protest was met with a dismissive wave. "If you keep this up, Richard will have to come back. Is that what you want? To ruin his career with all this nonsense?" Eleanor fell silent, wounded by the accusation and weary from fighting to be believed. That night, she sat at her desk and began writing everything down. Symptoms, dates, conversations, and every word Veronica had flung her way. She tucked the notes away with her medical files, determined to have a record of the truth, just in case she needed it. As autumn deepened, Veronica's campaign intensified. She spoke to neighbors in hushed tones, casting Eleanor as a difficult case and a burden. She suggested to Richard, in their rare video calls, that his mother's illness was mostly in her head. Richard, overwhelmed with work and oceans away, urged his mother to listen to Veronica. "She knows what she's doing." Eleanor felt the walls closing in. Every time she tried to explain how unwell she truly was, Veronica countered with a story about her dramatic tendencies and crying wolf. Friends began to pull back, unsure who to believe. But Eleanor was no fool. She kept every appointment with Dr. Patel, submitted to every test, and saved every report. She asked pointed questions, requested copies of her files, and made sure to mention Veronica's disbelief at each visit. Dr. Patel listened with concern, promising that no matter what anyone else said, she would get the full truth. The turning point came one evening in early November, when Veronica arrived with a legal pad and an icy smile. "I've spoken with the home care agency," she announced. "They agree it's probably time you moved into assisted living. We can't go on like this. Richard and I have decided it's best." Eleanor's hands trembled, but her resolve crystallized. She agreed to a family meeting, insisting that Richard join by video call and that her doctor be looped in for a professional opinion. Veronica, smug and certain of her victory, set the date for the following week. That night, Eleanor sat under the lamplight, reading Dr. Patel's latest letter. It was detailed, compassionate, and clear. Her illness was real, her symptoms valid, and her capacity to make her own decisions intact. With this document, Eleanor finally held the power to reclaim her story. But she told no one, yet. For now, she let Veronica bask in her confidence, all the while preparing for the moment when the truth would shatter every false claim. The morning of the family meeting dawned gray and cold, with a drizzle streaking the windows and soaking the garden below. Eleanor woke before sunrise, moving quietly through her house. She made her tea, arranged her medical files and notes on the table, and read Dr. Patel's letter once more, drawing strength from the doctor's words. She dressed in her favorite sweater and fixed her hair with care, refusing to let Veronica or anyone else see her diminished by anxiety or age. Veronica arrived first, brisk and businesslike, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She brought a folder stuffed with paperwork, brochures for nursing homes, printed emails from the home care agency, even a notepad labeled Eleanor's Needs. She placed it all on the kitchen table, laying out her arsenal as if preparing for battle. "Let's do this in the living room," Eleanor said, her voice gentle but firm. Veronica's smile tightened, but she followed. They set up Richard's laptop for the video call. When his face flickered onto the screen, Eleanor was struck by how tired and distracted he seemed, eyebrows pinched, tie askew, and dark circles under his eyes. He greeted his mother quickly, but most of his attention was for Veronica. Veronica took the lead, recounting the last few months in dramatic tones. Eleanor's had several spells, but nothing serious. She forgets things, gets confused, sometimes refuses to eat. "I've had to step in, Richard. I'm worried about her safety, and yours, if you're forced to come back." Eleanor listened without interruption, making mental notes of each exaggeration and lie. Veronica grew bolder as she spoke, weaving a narrative of emotional instability and refusal to cooperate. She handed Richard her folder, holding it up to the camera, displaying checklists and timelines. "I've done everything I can, but she's not improving. She's making it all up." Richard hesitated, glancing at his mother. "Is that true, Mum? Are you pretending?" His tone was unsure, almost pleading for an easy answer. Eleanor met his gaze. "Richard, I've never pretended. I know my body, and I know I'm not well. But I'm not helpless. I've kept every appointment, every record. I want you to hear the truth, from someone qualified." Before Veronica could interject, Eleanor dialed Dr. Patel and put her on speaker. The doctor's voice, calm and clear, filled the room. "Eleanor has been thorough, responsible, and honest. Her health issues are real, and they are documented. I have no concerns about her ability to live independently, provided she has community support. In fact, I'm more concerned about undue pressure being placed on her." A beat of silence followed. Veronica's confidence faltered, but she rallied. "But you haven't seen her at home. She's so frail, surely she needs supervision." Dr. Patel replied, "That's not what I've observed. My clinical assessment is based on tests, visits, and direct interviews. If anyone questions my findings, they're welcome to request a second opinion, but so far, Eleanor has done everything right." Richard seemed to relax, uncertainty slipping from his face. "Thank you, Doctor. I trust your judgment." Eleanor, emboldened, spoke up. "I've kept notes, Richard, dates, symptoms, everything that's happened. I want to stay in my home, and I'm capable of making my own decisions. I'll accept help where it's needed, but not under a cloud of suspicion." Veronica, cornered, tried a new tactic. "But what about the neighbors? Everyone says you're struggling." Eleanor shook her head. "I've spoken to my friends, to the minister, to everyone who truly cares. They know what's really going on. I don't need to prove anything to gossip." The meeting ended with an uneasy truce. Richard apologized for doubting her, promising to support her wishes. Veronica packed up her folders in silence, her plans for control unraveling. That evening, Eleanor called Ruth, her oldest friend, and recounted the meeting in detail. "It's not over, Ruth, but I finally feel like I have a voice again." Ruth congratulated her, promising to be there whenever needed. As Eleanor sipped her tea and watched the rain streak the windows, she felt a quiet pride. The battle for her autonomy had begun in earnest, and she was no longer fighting alone. After the fraught family meeting, Eleanor sensed a change not just within her own walls, but all around her. The tension between her and Veronica had shifted, less open confrontation, but more subtle maneuvering. Veronica became less overt, but her campaign to undermine Eleanor's credibility now took quieter, more insidious forms. Suddenly, neighbors began dropping by with concerned expressions. Mrs. Turner from across the street brought over soup, lingering longer than usual, glancing around the house and asking how Eleanor was really doing. Mr. Brown next door offered to shovel her walk before the first snow, but managed to mention, more than once, that he'd heard you had a rough patch. Even the mailman lingered on the porch, inquiring about Eleanor's health. It was clear that Veronica had been making calls and quietly spreading her version of events, painting Eleanor as frail, forgetful, and possibly a danger to herself. At first, Eleanor bristled. She wanted to snap at the prying questions, but instead, she calmly reassured her neighbors. She invited them in for tea, showing them her neat home, the garden still carefully tended, her organized pillbox and the fresh groceries in the fridge. She found unexpected allies in some of her oldest friends. Ruth, fiercely loyal, began coming by more often, organizing little gatherings, bridge afternoons, recipe exchanges, book club meetings. Their small circle offered Eleanor the warmth and connection she desperately needed, a buffer against the coldness creeping in from outside. But the stress of being constantly monitored wore on her. She caught Veronica peeking into her medicine cabinet, tallying pill bottles and jotting things down in her ever-present notebook. When Eleanor objected, Veronica smiled coldly. "Just being thorough, Eleanor. You know, for your own good." Things came to a head one windy afternoon when Eleanor returned from the doctor's to find Veronica in the kitchen with two of the neighbors, Mrs. Turner and Mrs. Feldman. They looked up, caught in the act, their conversation silenced as Eleanor entered the room. Veronica spoke first, tone syrupy sweet. "We were just discussing some ways to help you around the house. You can't keep up with everything, and it's time to accept help." Eleanor, tired of the charade, put her grocery bag down and met Veronica's eyes. "I appreciate the concern, but I'll ask for help if I need it. For now, my doctor says I'm perfectly capable, and I have her note if you'd like to read it." She held up a copy of Dr. Patel's letter, the edges neatly folded, ready to be presented at a moment's notice. The neighbors exchanged glances, embarrassed. Mrs. Turner apologized, mumbling about meaning well. Mrs. Feldman excused herself, suddenly eager to leave. Veronica, momentarily at a loss, tried to regain the upper hand. "You don't have to be so defensive, Eleanor. We're all just worried." Eleanor stood her ground. "Worry is one thing, Veronica. Undermining me is another. If you want to help, respect my choices and my privacy." The conversation ended quickly. Veronica stormed out, slamming the front door behind her. Eleanor watched from the window as her daughter-in-law stalked down the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear. She knew the rumors would continue, but she also knew that now, her neighbors had heard her side of the story. That evening, Ruth brought a fresh loaf of bread and a new sense of resolve. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. People need to see you're strong, and you are." They shared dinner, laughter, and the comfort of true friendship. Eleanor realized that the fight was no longer just about her illness, but about dignity and independence. She was determined not to let Veronica, or anyone else, write the ending to her story. The days that followed left Eleanor oscillating between exhaustion and a quiet, simmering strength. She found herself scrutinizing every interaction, listening for subtext in every conversation. Veronica grew careful, no longer openly confrontational, but Eleanor sensed her watching, waiting for any slip, a missed appointment, a forgotten bill, a moment of confusion that could be reported back to Richard. Yet, Eleanor's mind was sharper than ever, honed by necessity. She documented everything, each meal she cooked, every visit to Dr. Patel, every walk to the post office. She updated her files with appointment cards and receipts, and always kept Dr. Patel's note in her purse. With Ruth's encouragement, Eleanor began inviting other friends and neighbors over more frequently, subtly demonstrating her independence and capability. She cooked Sunday dinners, hosted book club meetings, and helped organize the church bake sale. Each event became another quiet piece of evidence in her favor, a community bearing witness to her vitality. One day, Eleanor received an unexpected call from the home care agency. The caseworker, a soft-spoken woman named Linda, explained that Veronica had submitted a formal request for an in-home safety assessment. According to Veronica, Eleanor was prone to falls, had increasing confusion, and was refusing medication. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She thanked Linda for the call and asked that the assessment be scheduled at a time convenient for herself. When Linda arrived, Eleanor welcomed her into a spotless home. She walked Linda through every room, demonstrating the grab bars she'd installed herself, the organized pantry, the calendar filled with upcoming appointments and social gatherings. Linda took careful notes, nodding in approval. At the end of the visit, Eleanor handed her a copy of Dr. Patel's note, along with her meticulous daily logs. Linda smiled warmly. "You're more prepared than most people I visit. If there are any concerns, I'll be sure to clear them up in my report." Eleanor felt a surge of satisfaction. Veronica's attempt to build a paper trail had backfired. Not only would the official report clear her name, it would serve as further evidence of her competence. But Veronica, learning of the assessment's outcome, was undeterred. She confronted Eleanor with a new barrage of accusations, this time in front of Richard on another video call. "She's faking, Richard. I see it every day. She stumbles, she forgets things, she pretends to be more ill than she really is. She's manipulating you and everyone else." Richard hesitated, torn between his wife and his mother. He asked Eleanor directly, "Mom, are you sure you're telling me everything? Maybe it would be easier if you let Veronica manage things for a while." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Richard, I am telling you the truth. I'm doing everything my doctor has advised, and I have the records to prove it. If you doubt me, talk to Dr. Patel yourself." Richard mumbled that he would, but the hurt in his eyes lingered. Veronica, sensing she was losing ground, pressed harder. "You're just too proud to admit you need help, Eleanor. This is exactly what I've been warning Richard about. We can't keep ignoring the problem." That night, Eleanor sat at her desk and wrote a long letter to Richard, detailing her experience, her wishes, and her fears. She included copies of her medical records, Dr. Patel's note, and the home care agency's assessment. She ended the letter with a simple plea, "Believe me, not because I'm your mother, but because I have never lied to you." She mailed the letter the next morning, praying Richard would read it with an open mind. Meanwhile, Ruth continued to rally support among Eleanor's friends. She encouraged them to reach out to Richard, sharing stories of Eleanor's strength, her involvement in the community, and the way she continued to thrive despite her health challenges. As winter set in, Eleanor prepared herself for whatever came next. She had laid her trap carefully, not out of malice, but from the desperate need to protect her own dignity. The pieces were falling into place, and she was ready for the day when the truth could no longer be denied. Winter deepened, blanketing the town in frost and early darkness. Eleanor's house glowed with lamplight, warm despite the chill outside. But inside, a storm was brewing. Veronica, stung by the failed in-home assessment and Linda's glowing report, became more relentless, her tactics sharper and more public. It started at church one Sunday. Veronica took Eleanor's arm too firmly, loudly announcing, "We really must look after Eleanor. She's been so forgetful lately, haven't you, dear?" Her voice was syrupy for the crowd, but the look she shot Eleanor was ice. The congregation watched, some nodding in concern, others exchanging doubtful glances. Eleanor stood tall, brushing off Veronica's hand with a polite smile. "Thank you for caring, Veronica, but I'm perfectly able. Would you like to help me set up for coffee hour?" She ushered her daughter-in-law into the kitchen, putting her to work, refusing to give ground. Still, the whisper campaign intensified. Veronica spoke with the minister privately, implying that Eleanor was struggling behind closed doors. She visited the pharmacy to double-check Eleanor's prescriptions and called Ruth late at night, hinting that maybe it's time to intervene for Eleanor's own good. At every opportunity, Veronica sowed doubt, hoping, perhaps, to pressure Eleanor into surrender, or at least force her to accept outside help on Veronica's terms. Richard's calls became more frequent, his voice strained with worry. "Mom, Veronica says you missed your pills last week. Are you sure everything's okay?" Eleanor calmly recited her medication routine, reminding Richard that Dr. Patel's note and the home assessment both confirmed her competence. But the pressure wore on Eleanor. She felt it in her bones, the way people glanced at her in the market, the way old friends now called just a little too often. She worried for Richard, stretched between continents and manipulated by his wife's constant narrative. She felt for herself, too, growing tired of defending her very right to be believed. One particularly bitter evening, Eleanor arrived home to find a pile of legal documents on her kitchen table, a petition for guardianship, already signed by Veronica and prepared for Richard. Veronica sat at the table, her expression triumphant and cold. "We're not waiting any longer, Eleanor. I'm doing what's best for you, whether you like it or not." Eleanor's hands trembled, but she drew herself up, voice steely. "You don't get to decide what's best for me. I have the right to make my own choices, and I have the evidence to prove it." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the court says. I have witnesses, and I've documented every incident." Eleanor didn't answer. She collected the documents, her heart racing, and spent the night reviewing every note, every log, every report from her doctor and the agency. In the morning, she called Mr. Jenkins, her solicitor, arranging for an emergency consultation. Mr. Jenkins listened intently, reviewing Eleanor's files and the petition. "You've done everything right, Mrs. Drake. The court will want to see evidence, and you have it. They won't be swayed by rumors, especially with Dr. Patel and Linda willing to testify." Over the next days, Eleanor prepared for the inevitable legal battle. She shared her plans with Ruth, who rallied the community, collecting written statements from neighbors, church friends, and the social worker. Ruth even reached out to Dr. Patel and Linda, both of whom agreed to attend any hearing and speak on Eleanor's behalf. As the court date neared, Veronica grew more anxious, her confidence finally beginning to crack. Richard, increasingly uncomfortable with his wife's obsession, asked to see all the evidence himself. Eleanor welcomed him with open arms, showing him her records, her logs, the glowing notes from doctors and friends. For the first time, Richard hesitated in his support of Veronica. "Maybe I haven't been fair, Mum," he admitted quietly, holding the doctor's letter in his hands. Eleanor hugged him, her heart aching with relief and sadness. "I only ever wanted to be believed, Richard. I only ever wanted to live my life with dignity." The battle was not over. The legal hearing loomed. But Eleanor no longer felt alone. With allies at her side and the truth in hand, she was ready to face whatever came next, and finally put an end to Veronica's relentless campaign. The morning of the hearing dawned with a heavy, muffled silence. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the streets and muffling the city's usual bustle. Eleanor dressed carefully, donning a navy blue suit she had worn to Richard's graduation years ago. Ruth arrived early, carrying a stack of supporting letters and a thermos of strong tea. They rode to the courthouse together, nerves buzzing but hearts steady. The small courtroom was crowded. Veronica sat at one table, flanked by her lawyer, eyes flashing with nervous determination. Richard sat beside her, looking drawn and uncertain. Across the aisle, Eleanor sat with Mr. Jenkins, clutching her folder of evidence. Ruth took her place in the gallery, surrounded by church friends and neighbors who had come to bear witness. Proceedings began with Veronica's lawyer. He described a pattern of declining capacity, dangerous forgetfulness, and willful noncompliance with medical advice. He cited Veronica's extensive documentation, statements from neighbors, some, Eleanor knew, pressured or misled, and the petition for guardianship. Then Eleanor's turn came. Mr. Jenkins spoke with calm authority, laying out Eleanor's logs, her daily medication records, the notes from Dr. Patel and Linda, and the community letters. He called Dr. Patel as a witness, and she testified confidently, "Eleanor Drake is of sound mind and fully able to manage her health and daily affairs." Linda, the social worker, added her observations of Eleanor's organization, community engagement, and ability to live independently. Ruth delivered a heartfelt statement about Eleanor's courage and clarity, her role in church and town, and the unjust treatment she had endured. Finally, the judge addressed Eleanor directly. "Do you wish to speak for yourself, Mrs. Drake?" Eleanor stood, hand steady, voice clear. "Your Honor, I have always been honest about my health. I have done everything my doctor and my family have asked of me. I am not pretending, and I am not helpless. What I need is to be trusted to live my life, not controlled by someone who doubts me at every turn." Veronica glared, but the momentum had shifted. Richard, given a chance to speak, admitted, "I see now that I was wrong to doubt my mother. The evidence is clear. I want her to have the dignity and freedom she deserves." After reviewing the evidence and listening to testimony, the judge ruled in Eleanor's favor. There is no basis for guardianship at this time. Mrs. Drake is competent, organized, and fully able to direct her own care. Any further attempts to undermine her autonomy will be viewed seriously by this court. A wave of relief washed over Eleanor as the judge's gavel fell. Veronica's face flushed with frustration and embarrassment. The neighbors and friends who had come to support Eleanor cheered softly, and Ruth squeezed her hand, eyes bright with pride. As Eleanor left the courthouse, snowflakes swirling around her, she felt a profound peace settle over her. She had been tested, doubted, and nearly overpowered, but she had stood her ground, and won. That night, Richard called again, his voice different, softer, full of remorse. "I'm sorry, Mum. I should have listened sooner. I hope you'll forgive me." Eleanor smiled through tears. "All I ever wanted was for you to believe me, Richard. We'll get through this together." With the nightmare behind her, Eleanor looked forward, more determined than ever to live each day fully, surrounded by those who truly loved and respected her. In the weeks after the hearing, Eleanor's world changed. The anxiety that had clung to her for months finally slipped away, replaced by relief and a growing sense of freedom. Her neighbors' attitudes shifted as well. The few who had once eyed her with suspicion now came bearing apologies, homemade casseroles, bouquets from winter gardens, and quiet words of support. Ruth organized a celebratory gathering at the church. The hall filled with friends, laughter, and stories about Eleanor's perseverance. Even the minister, who had once listened to Veronica's whispers, praised Eleanor's resilience from the pulpit. "Let her be an example of strength, honesty, and community," he said, drawing applause. Veronica, meanwhile, receded from Eleanor's daily life. Her public defeat left her sullen and bitter, less eager to appear at church or neighborhood gatherings. Eleanor did not gloat or seek revenge. She simply allowed the natural consequences to unfold, focusing her energy on healing. Richard visited from overseas for the first time in over a year. He spent quiet afternoons with his mother, walking through snowy parks and helping with household chores. They spoke honestly, about his regrets, about the pressures Veronica had placed on him, about Eleanor's own fears and triumphs. "I never should have doubted you, Mum," he confessed one evening, sipping tea at the kitchen table. Eleanor forgave him easily. "We all want to do what's right for the people we love. Sometimes, it just takes a little longer to see the truth." With the guardianship threat behind her, Eleanor took on new projects. She joined a volunteer group at the food pantry, organized a spring book fair, and began teaching crochet classes at the community center. Her days grew full and satisfying, her health improving now that stress no longer haunted her sleep. Dr. Patel checked in regularly, always pleased with Eleanor's progress. "You're as sharp as ever," she declared at each appointment. "Keep proving everyone right." Ruth, ever the stalwart friend, helped Eleanor plan a trip, a long-postponed visit to the seaside, something Eleanor had dreamed of since before her illness. They sent postcards from the boardwalk, ate fish and chips by the harbor, and watched the sunrise, faces warmed by the salty breeze. One evening, as Eleanor sat knitting by the window, she reflected on everything she'd survived, the disbelief, the accusations, the loneliness, and the courtroom drama. She realized that she had come out not just whole, but stronger. Her independence was not a burden, but a victory hard won. The community had learned something too. Neighbors stopped her in the market to ask for advice, not out of pity, but out of genuine respect. The legacy of her battle was clear. Honesty, dignity, and the courage to demand the truth had changed not just her life, but the lives of those around her. Eleanor smiled, her heart full. She knew there would always be challenges, but now she faced them not as a victim, but as the author of her own story. Spring arrived at last, brightening Eleanor's home with sunlight and birdsong. The garden she once feared she might never see again burst into bloom, daffodils, tulips, and hyacinths painting the lawn in joyful color. Ruth and the ladies from the crochet group helped her plant window boxes, and even Richard, still in town, dug up soil and trimmed hedges, working side by side with his mother. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Eleanor became a fixture in her community, helping neighbors with groceries, mentoring a young woman newly diagnosed with a chronic illness, and offering her wisdom at church gatherings. Her ordeal had made her a symbol of resilience. People sought her counsel, not just out of sympathy, but because they recognized her hard-won strength. Veronica, on the other hand, retreated further, her influence in the family and neighborhood greatly diminished. She had lost the trust not only of her husband, but of the wider community as well. No amount of explanation could erase the memory of her failed schemes or the grace with which Eleanor had responded. Over time, the bitterness faded to the background, no longer a shadow in Eleanor's life. Eleanor's health stabilized. With the stress behind her, she regained energy and optimism, embracing every new day as a gift. She wrote letters to friends, planned small adventures, and welcomed visitors with the same open heart she had always offered. One afternoon, Dr. Patel visited for tea, her tone both professional and affectionate. "You've shown everyone, Eleanor. The right note at the right time can change a life, or even save one." Eleanor smiled, knowing the truth of those words. The doctor's letter, clear, compassionate, and unequivocal, had been the key that shattered Veronica's web of doubt. But Eleanor's victory had not just been about a piece of paper. It was the courage to persist, to trust her own experience, and to reach for help when she needed it most. As spring matured and the days grew longer, Eleanor felt gratitude above all else. For Ruth's friendship. For Richard's renewed love. For the quiet strength that had seen her through the darkest months. And for the simple pleasure of sitting in her garden, a cup of tea in hand, watching the flowers sway in the breeze. Her story became a gentle warning and an inspiration in the town, a reminder never to doubt the truth of those who speak it, no matter how frail or quiet they may seem. It was a story not of illness, but of healing, not of conflict, but of dignity restored. And as the seasons turned, Eleanor's life remained a testament to one woman's refusal to be silenced, her last word not a cry for help, but a song of independence.